The rain had been falling for hours over Seattle's harbor, thin, steady, and relentless. Inside the Harbor Light, the city's most elegant restaurant by the water, every glass shimmered with candlelight, every sound softened by the hush of rain tapping against the windows. At table 7, a man in a charcoal suit sat alone, scrolling through his phone. His name was Adrian Cole, founder of Monarch Capital, a man whose reputation was built on ruthless precision. He had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, but tonight he was bored. He glanced up when the waitress approached. Young, composed, her dark hair tied back neatly, a small silver watch pendant resting against her throat. "What can I get for you, sir?" she asked, her tone calm, practiced. Adrian smirked. "Maybe you could recommend where I should invest next. I've already invested too much in red wine tonight." The line was meant to be a joke, a little arrogance disguised as charm, but the woman didn't giggle. She tilted her head slightly. "That depends," she said. "Do you prefer long-term growth or short-term distraction?" Her answer caught him off guard. "I beg your pardon?" She didn't hesitate. "If it's short-term, I'd suggest diversifying before your portfolio drowns with the rest of the market. If it's long-term, look for something that grows quietly when no one's watching, like renewable infrastructure or human potential." The corner of his mouth twitched. For a second, Adrian Cole, man of strategy and control, had nothing to say. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lena," she said simply, writing down his order without looking up. "And before you ask, sir, my financial advice is complimentary with the meal." Then she walked away. Adrian watched her go, her posture steady, movements efficient, but there was something else about her, something he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way she seemed to carry exhaustion with elegance. Or the way her eyes, when they'd met his, looked like someone who had seen too much and chosen silence over explanation. For a man who could read anyone in 5 seconds, that unreadable face irritated him, and intrigued him even more. The night moved in slow rhythm. Forks clinked, laughter rose and fell, and outside, the rain kept writing its quiet poetry on the glass. Adrian glanced around the restaurant. Every patron seemed familiar. Politicians, investors, journalists, all faces that performed for one another. But not hers. She didn't perform. She belonged nowhere, and yet moved through the room as if she had nothing left to prove. When Lena returned with his drink, Adrian tried again. "You seem too sharp to be serving tables." She smiled faintly. "Sharpness isn't always rewarded where it should be, sir." "Adrian," he corrected, "not sir." "Then Adrian," she said, placing his glass before him, "some people use their sharpness to climb, others use it to survive." Her words lingered longer than the taste of the wine. He watched the condensation trail down his glass and wondered what kind of survival required eyes like hers, steady but haunted, like someone still counting invisible losses. At another table, a couple argued over a dessert order. Lena handled it gracefully, her voice calm, her gestures minimal. Adrian found himself observing the small details, how she adjusted her tray, how her fingers trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. He wasn't used to noticing people like her. His world was filled with confident negotiators, poised and polished, not quiet waitresses who spoke in metaphors. When she approached again, he leaned back in his chair. "You ever think of working in finance, Lena?" She blinked, surprised. "You ever think of washing dishes?" He laughed softly for the first time that evening. "Touché." She shrugged. "I just mean, every job has its risks. Some spill wine, some spill billions." Her tone wasn't mocking, but matter of fact. He studied her for a beat longer, but before he could respond, she was gone again, gliding toward another table like the rain itself. Quiet, necessary, and completely beyond his control. As the night deepened, the restaurant emptied. Adrian finished his meal, but lingered, half hoping to cross paths with her again. He caught fragments of conversation from other servers. Lena's closing up tonight, poor things taking extra shifts again. Extra shifts, extra composure, extra mystery. When she brought his check, Adrian slipped his card inside and asked, "What do you do when you're not giving free investment lectures?" "Mostly," she said. "Try not to think about what I should have done differently." He frowned. "That sounds like regret." "It's more like rehearsal," she replied softly. "You keep practicing the past until the future stops feeling impossible." Then, with the faintest nod, she turned away. Her words hit deeper than he expected. They weren't poetic. They were the kind of truth people only admit after losing something important. Outside, when the valet brought Adrian's car around, the rain had eased to a mist. He slipped into the driver's seat, but his reflection in the windshield showed her silhouette still inside, cleaning the last table, moving methodically beneath the amber glow of the chandeliers. He couldn't explain it, but something about her felt unfinished, like a line of music that had stopped mid-note. He opened his phone, typing a short message to his assistant. "Get me a background on a waitress named Lena Alvarez, the Harbor Light, priority." He hesitated before hitting send. It wasn't business curiosity, it was something else entirely. A sense that the universe had just handed him a riddle, and he had no idea whether solving it would save him or undo him. Back inside, Lena untied her apron and exhaled deeply. The restaurant was silent except for the gentle hum of rain returning. She checked her phone. 3 unread messages, one from her landlord, one from the bursar's office, and one from her mother asking, "Are you okay?" She typed a quick reply, "I'm fine, just tired." Then she deleted it before sending. Her gaze fell on the old silver watch pendant hanging from her neck. The hands were frozen at 11:59, the minute her life had stopped 3 years ago. She pressed it gently between her fingers, whispering under her breath, "Not yet, not tonight." Outside, a car door slammed. Lena turned toward the window just in time to see a sleek black sedan pull away from the curb, taillights slicing through the fog. Through the glass, for one fleeting moment, she met Adrian Cole's gaze as he looked, back from the driver's seat. Neither smiled, but both somehow knew this was not the end of their story, only the spark before the storm. The rain had quieted, leaving the city draped in fog. Seattle slept under a silver haze while Lena walked home, shoes soaked through, apron folded under her arm. The harbor light's glow faded behind her, replaced by the hum of neon reflections trembling in the puddles. Her apartment sat above a small laundromat that never closed, warm air smelling of detergent drifting up through the thin floorboards. She flicked on a single lamp, the light too yellow, too honest. The clock on the wall read 12:47 a.m. Another night survived. Lena dropped her keys, kicked off her shoes, and opened her laptop. Its fan whirred like a sigh before the screen bloomed to life. There, waiting at the top of her inbox, was a message with the subject line she had been hoping for all week. Financial aid decision, Pacific Northwest University. Her finger hovered over it. For a heartbeat, she imagined a yes, tuition covered, a step closer to reclaiming the future that had been stolen from her. But the dream dissolved the moment she clicked. "Dear Ms. Alvarez, we regret to inform you that your request for additional tuition assistance has been denied due to limited funding. We encourage you to reapply next term." The words didn't shout. They simply closed a door. Lena stared at the screen until the glow blurred. 3 months of extra shifts, 2 years of saving every tip. And still, the universe whispered, "Not yet." She closed the laptop slowly, the reflection of the words, "application denied," still burning behind her eyelids. The silence pressed in. She crossed to the tiny window, looking out over the harbor. The Ferris wheels spun dimly through the mist, each rotation mocking her stillness. On the counter sat a notice folded in half, her landlord's reminder. Rent due in 2 days. Another quiet weight added to the pile. Her phone buzzed once, then again. The first message came from an unknown number. "This is Raymond, floor manager at the Harbor Light. Mr. Cole left instructions before he departed. He'd like to invite you to Monarch Capital tomorrow. Says he needs a few insights about global markets. Noon sharp if possible." She read it twice, certain it was a mistake. Insights about global markets? He'd probably meant it as another joke. She typed a short reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard as another vibration startled her. This time, it was her landlord. "Lena, please confirm payment by Friday, or I'll have to post a late notice." Lena leaned her head back against the wall. The hum of the washing machines below rose through the floor like distant thunder. Her savings could barely cover tuition, let alone rent. Her job paid enough to survive, not to start over. She thought of Adrian Cole, how easily he'd tossed money around. The weight of his watch, the confidence in his voice when he said, "You seem too sharp for this job." He probably hadn't meant anything by it. Men like him never did. Still, curiosity tugged at her. He'd asked for insights, not service. Maybe for once her knowledge could buy her more than survival. She reopened the manager's message. Her reply was brief. "Tell Mr. Cole I'll be there." Her finger hesitated over send. Once she pressed it, the boundary between her past and present would start to blur again. After 3 years of hiding, she'd built a fragile peace. Anonymous, invisible, safe. She hit send. The blue checkmark appeared instantly, sealing her decision. Sleep refused to come. Lena sat at the small table, flipping her watch pendant between her fingers. The metal was cold, its hands forever frozen at 11:59. A reminder of the night everything had stopped. She remembered the sound of security guards' footsteps echoing across marble floors, the flash of camera lights, the humiliation of headlines that had branded her guilty before she'd even spoken. Her name, Isabella Grant, had become shorthand for scandal. So she had erased it and built someone new. But now, a stranger with storm-gray eyes was pulling her back toward that world, and she didn't know why she couldn't resist. Morning came with the pale shimmer of drizzle. Her alarm buzzed at 7, though she hadn't slept. Coffee brewed weak and bitter. She drank it anyway. As she dressed, she hesitated over her uniform. The crisp white shirt, the dark slacks, every thread reminded her of servitude. She set them aside and reached for the one decent outfit she owned. A gray blouse, a simple pencil skirt, and a pair of flats that had lost their shine. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. No apron, no tired smile. Just a young woman trying to remember what ambition used to feel like. She pinned her hair, fastened the tiny watch pendant around her neck, and whispered, "Let's just see what he wants." By mid-morning, the city had come alive with horns and footsteps. Lena rode the bus downtown, watching raindrops race each other down the window. Her reflection flickered between skyscrapers, one life layered over another. She checked her phone again. A new message from Raymond, the manager. "Mr. Cole asked me to remind you, use the executive entrance on 3rd Avenue. Security will expect you. Security will expect you." The phrase made her stomach twist. Last time someone expected her, she'd walked into an ambush of cameras and accusations. The bus jerked to a stop and her heart followed. She could still turn back. Pretend she'd never seen the message. Stay invisible. Stay safe. But something stubborn inside her refused. Maybe it was pride, maybe hunger, or maybe the quiet, dangerous belief that she deserved to be more than a shadow. At 11:45, Lena stood outside the towering glass of Monarch Capital. Rain clung to her hair like tiny crystals. Through the revolving doors, she could see marble floors polished to a mirror, people moving with purpose and power. She swallowed hard, straightened her shoulders, and stepped inside. The receptionist looked up. "May I help you?" "Lena Alvarez," she said. "Mr. Cole asked me to come." For a moment, the woman's eyes flicked from Lena's damp coat to her modest shoes, assessing. Then she checked her computer, blinked, and said, "He's expecting you. Take the elevator to 54. Someone will meet you there." Lena thanked her quietly and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught us in reflection in the mirrored wall, small, nervous, but standing anyway. The ascent felt endless, the hum of machinery like a heartbeat growing louder. Her hands fidgeted with the pendant. "You shouldn't have come," whispered a voice in her head. "But if you hadn't, you'd never know what he really wants." When the elevator chimed open, the air felt different, cooler, scented faintly with cedar and glass. A skyline of steel stretched beyond the windows. A woman in a tailored suit waited beside the desk, tablet in hand. "Ms. Alvarez, I'm Diana Cross, Mr. Cole's assistant." Her tone was polite, but her eyes carried the same question everyone had when looking at Lena. "Who are you, really?" "This way," Diana said, gesturing toward the double doors at the end of the corridor. Through the glass, Lena caught a glimpse of Adrian Cole standing by the window, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear. He turned slightly, his reflection meeting hers across the pane. For a brief second, the city disappeared, and there was only the echo of last night's conversation. "You seem too sharp for this job." Maybe he'd been right. Maybe sharpness was meant for more than survival. Lena inhaled, stepped forward, and crossed the threshold, into a world she had sworn she'd left behind. The elevator doors opened with a hush, revealing the 54th floor of Monarch Capital, a world built of glass and silence. The air was colder here, filtered and expensive. The walls were transparent, the floors so polished they reflected the ceiling lights like a mirror. Lena stepped out, clutching her small purse, painfully aware that her shoes left faint marks on the marble. People in tailored suits moved with rehearsed purpose, their footsteps muffled by the kind of confidence only money could buy. Behind the sleek reception desk, a woman in a navy blazer looked up, her expression polite but distant. "May I help you?" "Lena Alvarez," Lena replied softly. "Mr. Cole asked me to come." The receptionist's brows flicked upward for a fraction of a second, surprise, maybe even disbelief, before she nodded toward a row of glass doors. "Of course, Mr. Cole is expecting you. This way, please." Lena followed the soft click of heels through the corridor, her own footsteps uneven against the rhythm. Everywhere she looked, she saw reflections, the city, the sky, herself multiplied by glass. For a moment, it felt like she was walking through a place that wasn't meant to exist in her world at all. The door to the conference room slid open. Adrian Cole stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the gray outline of Seattle dissolve into drizzle. He turned when she entered, his tone casual, almost teasing. "You're punctual. I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," she replied. A faint smile crossed his face, the kind of smile that could mean amusement or respect, or both. "Please, sit." The table stretched long and narrow, its surface made of dark glass that mirrored the rain outside. Two digital screens displayed clusters of numbers, stock graphs, and data visualizations pulsing faintly like heartbeats. Adrian gestured toward the first display. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I've been reviewing these energy startups, 6 different companies, emerging markets, high volatility, big promises." He leaned against the table, arms crossed. "My team can't agree which ones will make it past the next quarter. I'm curious to hear what you think." Lena blinked. "You want my opinion?" "I do." He nodded toward the screen. "Pretend you're running the firm. Where would you put your money?" She hesitated. "I'm not an analyst," he finished. "You already proved last night you think like one." The confidence in his tone startled her almost as much as the request itself. She glanced at the rows of figures, revenue, growth percentages, energy output, tax structures. It felt like slipping into a forgotten language. Her pulse quickened, but her mind steadied, falling back into old habits. Lena walked closer to the display, eyes scanning the patterns. 5 minutes passed in silence, except for the quiet hum of the projector. Then she said, "This one," she pointed to the second chart. "There's something off here." Adrian frowned. "Off? That company's been rated stable by 3 firms. Stability can be manufactured," she murmured. "Look here, these growth figures are too consistent. Real development curves fluctuate. And if you overlay their reported energy consumption, it doesn't match their claimed output." She tapped the screen. "According to this, they're producing at a scale that would require 40% more power than they're actually drawing from the grid." Adrian straightened slowly. "You're saying they're fabricating data? I'm saying they're pretending efficiency," she said, "which is worse, because it's believable." Her tone was calm, not defensive, just factual, clinical. For a moment, the only sound was rain tracing across the window. Adrian crossed his arms, studying her. "How did you even notice that? My analysts ran simulations for a week and didn't catch it." Lena's eyes stayed on the screen. "It's a pattern I've seen before." Then she caught herself, the words slipping out too easily. "I mean, sometimes data tells you what people want to see, not what's true." He nodded slowly, intrigued. "And what do you see?" She met his gaze. "I see a company masking losses with borrowed optimism." He laughed once, softly. "That's a poetic way of saying fraud." She didn't answer. Adrian leaned forward, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table. "When was the last time you worked with market data?" Lena froze. "I read a lot." "That's not what I asked." There was no accusation in his voice, just curiosity, sharp as glass. She forced a small smile. "Does it matter? You asked for an opinion. I gave you one." "It matters," he said, "because you are better than my staff, and they all have degrees from the right schools." She shrugged, trying to mask the flicker of panic behind her eyes. "Maybe they just don't listen to the rain." He tilted his head, amused. "The rain? It teaches rhythm," she said quietly. "Markets move the same way, never in straight lines, always in pulses. You just have to learn when to pause and when to wait for the next drop." For the first time, Adrian didn't have a clever reply. He stared at her as though seeing a reflection he couldn't quite identify. The door opened, breaking the tension. Diana Cross appeared, holding a tablet. "Mr. Cole, the The team is waiting for your feedback on the Green Future acquisition. In a minute, he said without looking away from Lena. Diana hesitated, her gaze flicking between them before she retreated. Adrian finally spoke. You just caught what my senior analysts missed for 10 days. That saves me a potential loss north of 100 million. Lena blinked. You're exaggerating. He smiled faintly. I never exaggerate about numbers. She stood there, unsure what to do with the sudden weight of his attention. I should probably go, she said softly. My shift starts at 5. Don't go back to the restaurant yet, he said, his tone gentler than before. Why not? Because I have a better idea, he replied. But it requires trust. Lena exhaled. Trust isn't cheap. Neither is talent, Adrian countered. Their eyes met. A challenge, a question, and a warning all at once. Outside, the city glimmered through the sheets of rain. The glass walls turned droplets into tiny prisms, scattering light across the room. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've been hiding in plain sight, haven't you? Lena's pulse skipped. Everyone hides something, he smiled. That's true. The difference is, I usually know what people are hiding. Then maybe you're slipping, she said, and the faintest edge of humor broke through her composure. Adrian laughed quietly. Maybe I am. He turned back to the screen, eyes narrowing at the data she'd uncovered. This changes everything, he murmured. When he looked at her again, something had shifted. Curiosity sharpened into intent. I'd like you to come back tomorrow, he said. No apron, no orders, just numbers. Lena hesitated, torn between reason and instinct. I'm not sure I'm qualified for whatever this is. Let me decide that, Adrian said. She studied him carefully, trying to read whether he was sincere or just playing another game. Finally, she said, if I come back, it'll be because I want to, not because you think I owe you. He nodded. Deal. She turned toward the door, her reflection gliding beside her across the glass. Behind her, Adrian's voice followed softly, almost to himself. Who are you, Lena Alvarez? She didn't answer. Some questions were safer unanswered, at least for now. The next morning broke gray and wet again, the kind of Seattle morning that made the whole skyline look like it was holding its breath. Lena sat at her small kitchen table, still in her coat, staring at the message that had just arrived on her phone. From Adrian Cole. Subject, proposal. If you're serious about using your mind instead of hiding it, meet me at Monarch Tower. Noon, no greeting, no signature, just confidence, stripped to its bones. Lena stared at it for a long moment, the steam from her coffee curling upward like hesitation made visible. She told herself she wasn't going. Then she found herself on the bus anyway. At 11:59, she stepped once more into the glass fortress of Monarch Capital. The same receptionist gave her a tight smile, now pretending surprise. He's expecting you again, Ms. Alvarez. The elevator swallowed her whole. As it rose, light flickered through the glass panels, reflections of her own face layered over the city beyond. She looked down at the small silver watch pendant around her neck. The hands were still frozen at 11:59. Noon was seconds away, and yet that moment of stillness never passed. She whispered to herself, not yet, as the elevator chimed open. Adrian was waiting in his office, the skyline stretched out behind him like a private empire. Right on time, he said. I was beginning to think punctuality was a lost art. I almost didn't come, she admitted. Yet here you are, he said, pulling a folder from his desk. Curiosity always wins. He opened the folder, revealing a brief contract printed on thick paper. At the top, in bold black letters, it read, Consulting Agreement, Codename, L.A. Lena frowned. L.A.? He smiled. Your initials, and a convenient bit of misdirection. People will assume it stands for something else. Los Angeles, maybe. That's the beauty of anonymity. You want me to work for you under a code name? I want your mind working for me, he said. Your real name is irrelevant. Call it an experiment. She hesitated. I'll only do this if I can work remotely. No office appearances, no public mentions. Adrian studied her. You don't like being seen, do you? I prefer results to recognition. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. You'll report directly to me through encrypted channels. I'll handle the logistics. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And in return? You'll be compensated well, he said, sliding a check across the table, more than she made in 6 months. I don't hire ghosts for charity. Before Lena could respond, the office door opened. Diana Cross entered, her posture sharp as glass. She glanced at Lena, then at the folder on Adrian's desk. Is this her? Diana, Adrian said evenly. Meet our new consultant. Diana's brow furrowed. Consultant? She's a waitress, not an analyst. Adrian didn't flinch. She identified a fraudulent company in 10 minutes that our analysts missed for weeks. Diana crossed her arms. And you think that's reason enough to trust her? No background, no education record, no professional references. She's a blank page. Blank pages, Adrian replied, are perfect for writing new ideas. Her voice sharpened. Or for covering lies. Lena stood still, saying nothing, though every muscle in her body tensed. Diana turned directly to her. Who trained you? No one, Lena answered quietly. Impossible. People don't speak the language of market data unless they've lived in it. Adrian cut in, his tone final. She'll work under the alias LA, off-site. That's my decision. Diana's jaw tightened. You're trusting a ghost, Adrian. A ghost with no past. He met her gaze coolly. Then maybe it's time someone without a past shapes the future. For a heartbeat, the air between them crackled. Logic against instinct, trust against control. Finally, Diana exhaled. You're the boss. But when this goes wrong, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. She turned on her heel and left, her heels striking the floor like punctuation marks of disapproval. Lena watched her go, pulse still uneven. She's right, she said. You don't know me. Adrian looked at her. I don't need to know who you were. I only care who you are now. That's a dangerous philosophy in finance. He smiled faintly. Dangerous philosophies make the biggest profits. Her expression softened despite herself. You think everything can be bought? No, he said, leaning forward slightly. But I've learned some things can only be earned. Trust, loyalty, truth. That's what I'm buying here. She studied him for a long moment, the rain behind him blurring the skyline into silver streaks. Finally, she reached for the pen. What happens if I say yes? Then you stop being a waitress, Adrian said simply, and start being what you were always meant to be. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed the alias. L.A., 3 letters, 1 new identity. For the next hour, they went through details. Payment structure, deadlines, secure servers. Lena's mind absorbed every line, every clause. She caught small inconsistencies even in the legal fine print, correcting them with precise questions. Adrian noticed. You're already rewriting the system, he said. Old habits die hard, she replied. When they finished, he extended his hand. Welcome aboard, L.A. She shook it briefly, her palm cool, her grip steady. A silent agreement passed between them. Professional, yes, but carrying something more electric beneath it. The elevator ride down was quiet. Lena watched her reflection in the mirrored wall. For the first time in years, she saw someone who looked less like a survivor and more like a strategist. But when the light flickered above, her gaze fell to the silver watch pendant. Its hands remained frozen at 11:59. No matter how high she rose, time hadn't moved. Not yet. She whispered, "Don't start again unless it's real this time." Outside, the rain had stopped. Seattle shimmered under a thin film of light, buildings rising like glass monuments to ambition. Somewhere on the 54th floor, Adrian Cole was already reviewing the contract, his signature beside hers, AC and LA, 2 names bound by secrecy. He didn't know the truth behind hers, and she didn't know the danger behind his curiosity, but the clock had begun to tick again, even if she couldn't hear it yet. Success, like the rain in Seattle, arrived quietly. Never dramatic, just constant. Within 3 weeks, Lena Alvarez, or rather LA, had become an invisible legend inside Monarch Capital. Her reports circulated anonymously through encrypted channels. Her analyses saved the company from at least one disastrous acquisition, catching inconsistencies that a dozen analysts had overlooked. Adrian Cole had begun to quote her in meetings without mentioning her name. According to our internal consultant, he'd say, these numbers don't hold. Each time the room would shift, subtle glances, murmurs of confusion, and curiosity about this unseen voice shaping their decisions. But for Adrian, it wasn't just her intelligence that fascinated him. It was the way she seemed to think beyond numbers, how she read markets the way poets read silences. One evening, after her latest report exposed hidden debts in a supposed green energy firm, Adrian sent a message through the secure line. "You just saved us $50 million. Remind me again why you're not running this place instead of me." Lena smiled faintly at her laptop screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Because I don't want to be seen." She deleted the message before sending it, but not everyone was charmed by the mysterious consultant. From her glass office on the same floor, Diana Cross watched the growing influence of LA with quiet unease. Numbers didn't scare Diana. People without identities did. She'd spent 15 years building her career on predictability, precision, and control. Yet here was a nameless, faceless analyst changing billion-dollar decisions overnight. So she made a call. A private investigator specializing in corporate background checks picked up. "I need everything you can find on a woman named Lena Alvarez," she said. "Anything unusual?" the investigator asked. "She's too perfect," Diana replied. "That's the problem." Days later, the file arrived in a discreet envelope. Diana locked her office door before opening it. Inside were printed records, timelines, fragments of public data. The summary was short but chilling. No trace of subject prior to 3 years ago. No tax filings, no academic records, no family connections, no digital footprint. In the world of finance, where everyone left data trails, that was impossible, unless someone had erased them deliberately. Diana leaned back in her chair, fingers tapping against the folder. "Who are you, Ms. Alvarez?" she murmured. The next morning, a high-level strategy meeting filled the glass conference room on the 54th floor. Rain streaked across the windows, painting liquid shadows on the city below. Adrian stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, confidence effortless. Around him sat senior executives, department heads, analysts, advisors, and at the far end, Lena, seated quietly with a slim folder in her lap. The topic was Project Horizon, a proposed merger with a tech firm promising revolutionary clean fuel algorithms. Adrian began. "LA's latest review indicates potential volatility. I'd like to hear her assessment in person." All eyes turned to Lena. She rose slowly, smoothing the front of her blouse. "Based on the data," she said, "the projections for this merger are inflated. Their patents are still pending approval, and the algorithm performance rate has been exaggerated by almost 20%. A murmur of surprise swept through the room. Adrian nodded approvingly. "Can you show us the discrepancies?" She tapped her tablet, projecting the data onto the wall screen. Rows of numbers cascaded across the glass like falling rain. "This section here," she said, pointing, "shows their forecasted scalability, but if you compare it with their reported R&D costs, it doesn't align. It's like claiming a skyscraper was built without a foundation." The metaphor landed perfectly. Even the most skeptical analysts leaned forward, but just as she was about to continue, Diana's voice cut through the silence. "Excuse me," she said, her tone smooth but sharp. "Before we move forward, I have a question about the source of this data." Adrian frowned slightly. "Go on." Diana rose from her seat, holding a printed folder in her hand. "I've been reviewing the credentials of everyone influencing our financial decisions, out of professional diligence, of course." Lena felt her pulse quicken. "And I discovered," Diana continued, "that our brilliant consultant, Ms. Alvarez, has no verifiable history prior to 3 years ago." The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. "What are you implying?" Adrian asked. "I'm not implying," Diana said calmly. "I'm stating. According to the public databases, Lena Alvarez appeared out of nowhere. No school records, no employment before the harbor light, not even a driver's license predating that. For all we know, she could be working under a fabricated identity." Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. Lena froze, her throat dry. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Diana, this is neither the time nor the place." "With respect," Diana countered, "it's exactly the place. We're making billion-dollar decisions based on reports from someone who doesn't exist on paper. Don't you think that's worth clarifying?" All eyes turned to Lena. She could feel them, doubt, curiosity, suspicion, burning through the glass walls like a magnifying lens. "I don't owe anyone here my personal history," she said quietly. "That's convenient," Diana replied, "because you don't seem to have one." Adrian stepped in. "That's enough." But the damage had already been done. Lena forced herself to sit down, every muscle taut. The screen behind her still displayed the data she'd prepared, the flawless logic, the proof of her competence, now overshadowed by the question of her identity. Adrian continued the meeting, but no one really heard him. The air had shifted, heavy and brittle. When it finally adjourned, Lena gathered her things without looking up. Adrian caught her arm gently as she passed. "Don't let this shake you," he said under his breath. "I'll handle it." She managed a small nod, though her voice was barely audible. "I've spent years handling it myself." Then she slipped out of the room, her reflection dissolving into the glass corridor. Back inside, Diana approached Adrian. "She's hiding something, Adrian. People don't just erase their pasts for fun." He looked out the window, rain streaking the skyline like cracks in glass. "Maybe she had a reason," he said. "Or maybe she's playing you," Diana replied. Adrian turned to her, eyes cold. "If you're wrong, you've just humiliated one of the most gifted minds I've ever met. If you're right, we'll both regret what comes next." That evening, Lena sat alone on a public bench overlooking the harbor, her reflection wavering on the water's surface. Her phone buzzed with an unread message from Adrian, but she didn't open it. Her hands found the small watch pendant again. 11:59. Always 1 minute before change. The city lights shimmered on the waves, bending and breaking like truth itself, distorted, yet still there beneath the surface. The storm rolled in before dawn, heavy and deliberate, as if the sky itself wanted to remind Seattle that some things never truly wash away. By mid-morning, the city was drenched, streets slick, air thick with mist. On the 54th floor of Monarch Tower, the glass walls blurred under streaks of rain. Inside, silence pressed against the hum of the world below. Lena stood outside Adrian Cole's office, clutching her tablet like a shield. She'd been summoned without explanation. The receptionist's voice had been polite, but something in the tone, something taut, had warned her this wasn't a routine meeting. Through the glass, she could see Adrian at his desk, back turned, speaking quietly into his phone. His reflection rippled in the window, distorted by rain. When he hung up, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Come in." She stepped down through the door. The office felt colder today. Or maybe it was just her. Adrian gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Lena." She hesitated. "Is this about what happened in the meeting?" "In a way," he said. "Diana tends to mistake curiosity for control. But she's not wrong about one thing. You're protecting something." He leaned back, studying her the way a chess player studies the board before the next move. "I'm not here to accuse you," he said softly. "I just want to understand who I'm working with." Lena's pulse thudded. "I've done nothing illegal. I believe you." His tone was steady, disarming. "But believing and understanding aren't the same. So, tell me, who were you before you became Lena Alvarez?" For a long moment, only the rain answered. It streaked down the window in uneven trails, mirroring the racing thoughts in her mind. Lena wanted to lie, to deflect, to claim that she'd changed her name for something mundane, marriage, a family dispute, anything but the truth. But then she saw his expression, not suspicion, not judgment, just quiet patience. And in that patience, she realized he wasn't another interrogator from her past. She set the tablet down. Her voice came low, almost reluctant. "My name was Isabella Grant." Adrian didn't flinch, but his eyes sharpened. "That name sounds familiar." "It should," she said. 3 years ago, it was in every financial headline in the country." He leaned forward slightly. "Lang Financial." She nodded once. "I was their senior market analyst, until the day they decided to destroy me." Adrian remained silent, giving her space to continue. "I once discovered irregularities, transactions routed through offshore accounts that didn't match our client data. I reported them to my department head. 2 weeks later, the Securities Commission raided the firm." Her voice trembled for the first time, but she forced it steady. "The evidence pointed to me. Wire transfers under my credentials, documents with my signature, accounts I didn't even know existed. The kind of setup that looks perfect on paper." "And you ran," Adrian said quietly. "I survived," she corrected. "There's a difference." He studied her face for a long moment. "You never tried to clear your name?" "I tried," she said. "But Lang Financial wasn't just a company. It was a dynasty. The Langs had friends in every corner of the system. Their word was gospel, mine was noise. My savings were frozen, my license revoked, my reputation obliterated before I could even file an appeal." She looked away, blinking hard. I sold everything, changed my name, and vanished. Becoming Lena Alvarez was the only way to keep breathing. Adrian stood and walked toward the window. The rain was heavier now, sliding down the glass like sheets of liquid glass between them and the gray skyline. "So, that's what you've been hiding," he said finally. "A crime you didn't commit. You don't know that," she murmured. "You only have my word." He turned to face her, eyes unwavering. "I've built an empire by reading people, Lena, and right now I see someone telling the truth. Someone who has been punished for being smarter than the wrong men." His words landed like an unexpected kindness, one she didn't know how to receive. Adrian walked back to his desk, picked up the folder labeled LA, and placed it gently before her. "You've given me more value in 3 weeks than half my executive team has in 3 years. I don't care what name you use. If Lang Financial stole your time, then let me help you get it back." Lena looked up sharply. "Why would you risk that?" "Because I've seen enough corruption dressed as competence," he said. "And because I don't like seeing talent buried alive." Her throat tightened. "This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I don't walk away from patterns that don't add up. And your story doesn't add up. If they framed you, they've probably done it to others. If you help me find proof, I can make sure they never do it again." "You'd go against the Langs?" she asked, incredulous. A wry smile touched his lips. "In my line of work, enemies are inevitable. I'd rather choose them than inherit them." The room fell quiet again. Lena's mind raced through memories she'd buried, Robert Lang's voice whispering, "Trust me." The flash of camera lights as security escorted her out. The silence of friends who'd suddenly forgotten her number. She swallowed hard. "You don't know what you're asking." Adrian's tone softened. "Then tell me. If they find out I'm working in finance again, they won't just smear my name. They'll destroy yours too. They have influence, money, reach." He smiled faintly. "So do I." Lena stared at him, caught between disbelief and something she couldn't name. Hope, maybe, or danger. They felt identical now. Outside, thunder rolled across the bay, a sound deep enough to vibrate through the floor. Adrian moved to the window and pressed a button, and the glass panels parted silently, letting in the faint scent of rain. Cold air rushed in, carrying the sound of the storm. He turned toward her, his silhouette outlined against the wet skyline. "You've been standing in the rain for 3 years, Lena. It's time you came inside." She rose slowly, unsure whether he was offering redemption or ruin. "If I say yes," she said carefully, "I need guarantees, anonymity, complete control of what information leaves this office." "You'll have it," he said, "and my protection." "I didn't ask for protection." "No," he said, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. "You asked for justice. The protection comes free." For a moment, neither spoke. The city shimmered through the rain. 1,000 lights refracted through glass, each one a fragment of something lost or found. Lena finally nodded, a quiet surrender to something larger than fear. Adrian extended his hand across the desk. "Partners?" Her fingers brushed his, and the faint shock of contact told both of them what words hadn't dared admit. This alliance was dangerous. "Partners," she whispered. Outside the window, lightning struck across the harbor, briefly illuminating their reflections side by side. 2 figures from different worlds, bound now by a single purpose and a shared shadow. The storm had not left Seattle. It simply learned to hide between days. Even when the rain paused, you could still feel it waiting, thick in the air, heavy on the skin, like a secret that refused to dry. It was under that restless sky that Adrian Cole built his secret alliance. 3 people, no assistants, no legal teams, no board members. Just himself, Lena Alvarez, and a woman named Martha Lee, a name once whispered in SEC corridors with quiet respect. Martha lived in the same building as Lena, 2 floors below. To most, she was the kind neighbor who collected mail for tenants who forgot. But before that, she'd been a senior auditor for the Securities and Exchange Commission, a watchdog of numbers, a woman who could smell corruption through an air vent. Adrian brought her in one evening, unannounced. They met in his penthouse office, lights dimmed, city glowing beneath them like a field of fireflies drowned in mist. "Lena," Adrian said, "meet Martha Lee. She's the only person outside this room I'd trust with what we're about to do." Martha, short and sturdy, with silver-streaked hair, extended her hand. "I've heard the name L.A. floating around in financial chatter. Never thought I'd meet her in person." Lena shook her hand cautiously. "You used to work with the commission. I still have friends there, Martha said. Quiet ones. Ones who remember your case, Isabella. Lena stiffened, her pulse jumping. You know, Martha gave a small nod. Everyone in compliance knew. The Langs made an example out of you to warn the rest. But the thing about examples, eventually they get re-examined. Adrian leaned against the table, which is why we're here. He opened a file on his tablet, its blue light flickering across their faces. Lang Financial wasn't just framing one analyst. Martha found a pattern, 4 others, across different firms, all with ties to Lang subsidiaries, all silenced within 5 years. Lena frowned. Silenced how? Martha's tone turned dry. Career destruction, mostly. Discrediting. One car accident that looked a bit too perfect. They all stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see. Offshore manipulation? Adrian asked. Martha nodded. And data laundering, financial mirroring through dummy startups. When someone got too close, they made sure the paper trail pointed elsewhere. Lena's breath hitched. Like me. Exactly like you, Martha said. They worked in near darkness, the only light coming from monitors glowing with spreadsheets and email archives. Each file was a puzzle, each timestamp a breadcrumb leading into corporate shadows. Lena's analytical mind came alive again, sharper than it had been in years. She traced inconsistencies through database snapshots, identified deleted ledgers, reconstructed account numbers that had been disguised through code. Adrian watched her work, fascinated by the quiet precision of her hands, the calm focus that replaced fear. He'd seen ambition before, hungry, ruthless, self-serving. This was different. This was purpose sharpened by survival. At one point, as midnight dissolved into 2 a.m., Adrian returned from the kitchen, carrying 3 cups of coffee. Lena didn't notice him until he set one beside her. You haven't blinked in 10 minutes, he said. She smiled faintly without looking away from the screen. I'll blink when I find the missing variable. Martha chuckled softly from the other end of the table. You two sound like my old audit team before an indictment. Adrian smirked. Then we're in good company. By 3 a.m., they had found their first clear thread. Martha pointed to a name on the screen. Cameron Vega, analyst at Asterion Holdings. Fired after reporting data falsification in 2019. Died in a car crash 2 months later. Lena scanned his employment record. Asterion Holdings. That's a subsidiary under Lang Financial's investment wing. And here's another, Martha said, pulling up a separate file. Priya Das, energy market researcher, filed a whistleblower report that never reached the SEC. Adrian's brow furrowed. It was intercepted. Martha nodded grimly. Someone inside the system's filtering the reports before they hit the registry. The Lang network's embedded deep. Lena leaned back, her fingers trembling slightly from fatigue. They've built a fortress of paper. Even if we expose them, it'll take months to prove intent. Adrian met her gaze. Then we'll make the evidence undeniable. Patterns don't lie. As the hours passed, the penthouse transformed into a war room. Screens lined the walls with maps of corporate relationships, each connection a thread in a spiderweb of deception. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, keeping rhythm with their determination. At one point, Lena stood by the window, staring at her own reflection merge with the glowing city below. Adrian joined her quietly. You okay? She nodded. I used to think the world was divided between the good and the corrupt. Now I'm starting to think it's just layers, people lying to survive or lying to win. He looked at her reflection beside his. And which are we? She thought for a moment. Somewhere in between? Adrian smiled faintly. That's where the truth usually hides. By dawn, the storm outside had quieted again, but the one inside was only gathering strength. Martha closed her laptop, rubbing her eyes. We have enough to build a timeline. 4 analysts targeted, all discovered inconsistencies tied to Lang-controlled shells. Lena scrolled through the shared document. If we cross-reference with their communications, we can trace where the manipulation started. Every lie leaves an echo. Adrian handed her another file. Start with this. Lang Financial's public filings for the year you were accused. The digital forensics might still carry metadata. Lena's voice softened. You've thought this through. I'm good at fighting battles that look unwinnable, he said, but I've never had someone who understood the enemy from the inside. She looked at him, the blue glow of the monitors catching in her eyes. That's not something to be proud of. Maybe not, Adrian said, but it might save lives. The 3 of them worked until the city began to stir again. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the windows streaked and glistening in pale light. Lena finally set her tablet down, exhausted but alive in a way she hadn't felt for years. For once, she wasn't running, she was fighting back. As she gathered her notes, Adrian spoke quietly. "I know this isn't easy, revisiting it all." "It's strange," she said. "For so long I tried to forget everything about that world. Now I realize forgetting was their victory." He nodded slowly. "Then remembering is your revenge." Lena smiled faintly. "Revenge isn't what I want, Adrian. I just want my truth to exist somewhere other than in my head." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "Then we'll make sure it does." The sky outside lightened from silver to blue, the storm finally giving way to morning. Martha gathered her coat and papers. "Get some rest, both of you. You'll need it. Once we start digging deeper, they'll feel it." As the elevator doors closed behind her, Lena turned back toward the glowing monitors. The screens reflected across the glass walls. Data, patterns, the architecture of deception illuminated in soft blue light. She reached for her coffee, now cold. Adrian did the same. Their eyes met briefly over the rim of the cups. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The war had already begun. The storm that had hovered for days finally broke open the next afternoon, drenching Seattle in a curtain of cold rain. The city blurred behind sheets of water, its skyline vanishing and reappearing with every flash of gray light. Inside the glass fortress of Monarch Capital, Adrian Cole stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, listening as the voice on the other end delivered a message he'd never expected to hear. "Mr. Cole, this is Robert Lang from Lang Financial. My father and I would like to propose a joint initiative, an expansion into Asian green markets. Our analysts believe Monarch could be the perfect partner." The voice was polished, friendly, measured, every word wrapped in velvet, every syllable hiding teeth. Adrian said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Tell him I'll consider it." He hung up, staring out at the rain. Behind him, the city lights shimmered like warning signs. That evening, Adrian called a private meeting in the penthouse office. Lena and Martha were already there, surrounded by the glow of blue monitors and open files. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his tone deceptively calm. "Robert Lang wants to meet." Martha's brows shot up. "The Robert Lang? That's either arrogance or desperation." Lena froze. The name had hit her like a ghost whispering through the walls. Adrian noticed the flicker in her eyes. "You know I can't decline," he said. "If we refuse, they'll smell fear. If we accept, they'll underestimate us." Lena's voice came quiet but certain. "Then accept, but record everything." A smile touched his lips. "Already planned." Martha leaned back, arms crossed. "You're walking into the lion's den, Adrian. Just make sure the lion doesn't know who's holding the tranquilizer." The next morning, Monarch's top floor was prepared for the meeting. Fresh flowers, new coffee, and the kind of stage warmth that corporations wear like perfume. Lena didn't join them in person. She couldn't. Her past and Robert Lang's presence could not coexist in the same room. Not yet. Instead, she sat in the dim glow of the penthouse's security control room, eyes fixed on the screens displaying multiple camera angles of the main office. Every lens captured a different view of the scene: the polished floor, the handshake, the mask of civility. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heartbeat wasn't. Around her neck, the small silver watch pendant gleamed faintly. The hands still frozen at 11:59, 1 minute before everything could fall apart. Robert Lang arrived precisely on time, as he always had. He stepped through the glass doors of Monarch Capital with the ease of a man who believed every room belonged to him. Tall, confident, late 30s, wearing a dark tailored suit and that same disarming smile he used the day he'd betrayed her. Adrian met him halfway, offering a hand. "Robert, it's been a while." "Too long," Robert said, gripping his hand firmly. "Congratulations on Monarch's recent success. I hear your anonymous consultant's been performing miracles." Adrian didn't blink. "You hear a lot of things." Robert laughed lightly, settling into the chair across from him. "That's the business we're in, isn't it? Hearing things before others do." Behind the security screens, Lena's stomach tightened. His voice hadn't changed. Still smooth, still serpentine. She leaned closer to the monitor as the men exchanged polite small talk. Profit margins, carbon credits, the illusion of shared purpose. But beneath the words, she recognized his rhythm. the same careful pattern of manipulation he'd used to corner her years ago. Adrian let him speak for several minutes before cutting in. "So, Robert, tell me, why Monarch? You have more capital and reach than I do." Robert smiled, spreading his hands. "Because capital without credibility is just paper. Monarch has a reputation for clean business. The Lang name, well," he laughed softly. "Let's just say we could both use each other." Adrian leaned back. "You mean you could use my reputation to launder yours?" The air stiffened. Robert didn't flinch. "I prefer to think of it as collaboration." The two men locked eyes across the polished table. The glass between them reflected the storm outside, lightning flickering through the skyline, rain like thin threads weaving deceit into the air. In the surveillance room, Lena's knuckles whitened around the edge of the desk. Robert's next words sent a chill down her spine. "There's something else," he said casually, swirling the coffee in his cup. "I heard Monarch's been using a mysterious consultant lately, a financial prodigy no less. Goes by initials only, L.A., isn't it?" Adrian's expression didn't change. "You've done your homework." Robert chuckled. "Oh, I always do. I'm fascinated by talent that hides. There's something poetic about anonymity. Makes you wonder what someone's running from." Lena's breath hitched. He paused just long enough to let the implication linger before continuing. "Maybe I'll hire her myself someday, if she's not too loyal to you." Adrian smiled, but there was iron beneath it. "She doesn't work for men who mistake curiosity for power." Robert's grin faltered for half a second. Then he laughed, as if the tension were just another form of theater. "Well said, Adrian. You always did know how to choose your allies carefully." When the meeting ended, the men shook hands again, a gesture of civility, hollow and dangerous. "Let's stay in touch," Robert said. "I'm sure we'll find a way to build something remarkable together." "I'm sure we will," Adrian replied. The handshake lingered 1 second too long, both of them knowing what it meant. Not partnership, declaration. As the elevator doors closed behind Robert, Adrian remained standing by the window, watching his reflection blur against the rain. In the control room, Lena exhaled shakily, finally releasing the breath she'd been holding for an hour. The small pendant in her hand felt heavier than ever. She pressed it to her chest, eyes burning, not from tears, but from the memory of all the lies that voice had once whispered into her trust. The intercom crackled. Adrian's voice came through. "He knows." Lena hesitated. "How much?" "Enough to start digging," Adrian said. "He's testing us." Martha's voice joined in from another line. "Then we dig faster." Later that night, the three of them gathered again in the penthouse, files spread out like a battlefield map. Lena replayed the recorded footage, watching Robert smirk frame by frame. "Every sentence of his is a trap," she said quietly. Adrian nodded. "He's baiting me, hoping I'll ask the wrong question. But what he doesn't know is that I already have what he's trying to hide." Martha leaned forward. "And what's that?" Adrian's gaze shifted to Lena. "Her." For a moment, silence filled the room. Unspoken truth, fragile and unbreakable, all at once. Lena met his eyes. "Then let's make sure he never realizes what I am until it's too late." Outside, rain washed down the tower windows again, relentless and steady. In the glass reflection, Adrian and Lena stood side by side, the city bending around them like a mirror warped by secrets. The storm was no longer the enemy, it was their camouflage. The night of the Seattle Art Museum Gala arrived like a performance written by fate itself, lavish, glittering, and dangerous beneath the surface. Rain fell in soft silver lines against the glass dome above the grand atrium, turning the city's lights into liquid reflections. The event was the kind of spectacle that made headlines, the union of wealth and influence disguised as philanthropy. Every major figure in finance was there. Investors, regulators, heirs to dynasties, all smiling under chandeliers that sparkled like 1,000 false stars. And among them, moving with quiet poise, was Lena Alvarez, though tonight she wasn't Lena at all. Tonight, she was L.A., the enigmatic consultant no one had ever seen, the mysterious mind behind Monarch Capital's recent triumphs. She stepped through the museum's glass doors, a vision in a dark navy gown that shimmered like stormlight. Her hair was swept into a low twist, her makeup simple yet precise, professional enough for respect, soft enough for disguise. At her wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve of her shawl, the small silver watch pendant hung motionless. The hands, still frozen at 11:59, caught a brief glint of chandelier light as she adjusted the clasp. Adrian Cole waited near the entrance, sleek in a charcoal tuxedo. When he saw her, he paused for half a breath, long enough for admiration, short enough for restraint. "You clean up well," he said quietly, offering his arm. "I was aiming for invisible," she replied. He smiled. "Impossible. You were born to draw attention, whether you want it or not." The orchestra swelled as they entered the main hall. Laughter floated beneath the high ceiling. Glasses chimed. Art gleamed under strategic spotlights. "Remember," Adrian murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "We're here to listen, not to provoke. Robert will be watching. His father, too." "I know," she said. "That's why I wore armor." He looked down at her gown. "That doesn't look like armor." "It is," she said. "You just can't see it." Adrian chuckled softly, and the tension eased for a moment. Half an hour later, Robert Lang appeared across the room, charming a cluster of bankers near a marble sculpture. His suit was immaculate, his smile calculated, but the real power wasn't with him. It moved slowly through the crowd behind him, an older man with white hair, an aura of patience and eyes that saw too much. Charles Lang, founder of Lang Financial, the architect of her downfall. When Lena saw him, her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to attend, let alone to notice her, but of course, he noticed everything. Charles approached like a man greeting old friends, every step measured, every gesture deliberate. "Mr. Cole," he said warmly, extending a hand. "A pleasure to finally meet the man who's shaken half the market without breaking a sweat." Adrian took his hand with a diplomatic smile. "I've only built on foundations you helped lay, Mr. Lang." "Flattery," Charles said with a low laugh, "the most reliable currency in our business." His gaze shifted to Lena. "And you must be the elusive LA I've heard so much about." Lena smiled with calm precision. "People do tend to exaggerate." "Modesty doesn't suit you, my dear," Charles said. "Genius rarely hides for long." The conversation drew the attention of nearby guests, their curiosity a low hum in the background. Adrian could feel the air tightening, the circle closing. Charles studied her face as though comparing it to a memory he couldn't quite place. "You know," he said slowly, "talent is a dangerous thing. It leaves fingerprints. Eventually, someone always matches them to history." Lena met his gaze without flinching. "Then I hope they're studying the right century." Charles's smile deepened. "A clever answer, but history has a way of looping back, especially for those who try too hard to escape it." For a split second, she felt the room blur, the sound of crystal, the weight of light, the echo of another conversation years ago in a boardroom where he'd said nearly the same words before destroying her life. But she refused to look away. "I prefer to invest in the present," Lena said calmly. "The past doesn't pay dividends." Adrian suppressed a proud smile. Charles chuckled, nodding slowly, spoken like someone who's learned how to survive the market. The orchestra shifted into a new rhythm, elegant and distant. Charles excused himself with a polite bow of the head. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Cole. Miss Alvarez, was it?" Lena's pulse skipped. He said it intentionally, a test. "Yes," she replied evenly. "But tonight, just L.A. will do." "Of course," he said, eyes glinting. "Names are so temporary, aren't they?" Then he was gone, folded back into the crowd of power brokers and perfumed lies. When he disappeared from view, Lena exhaled shakily. Adrian turned to her. "He knows." "He suspects," she corrected. "There's a difference. You handled him perfectly." "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I handled him like someone who's still afraid." He wanted to argue, but her eyes stopped him. They were too honest, too human. An hour later, as the gala continued in waves of laughter and champagne, Lena slipped away to the quieter east wing of the museum. She needed space, silence, air that wasn't dripping with deceit. The hall was lined with glass walls overlooking the rain-slick city. The reflections of the chandeliers shimmered on the floor like pools of light. She rested her hands on the railing, staring at the skyline, and then she looked down at her watch pendant, still frozen at 11:59. A reminder. The exact minute her world had stopped, 3 years ago. Adrian found her there, alone, the soft hum of the orchestra echoing faintly behind them. "You disappeared," he said gently. "Just needed a minute," she replied. "Ironically, this one seems to last forever." He stepped beside her, looking out at the rain. He was testing you. I know, but part of me wanted to tell him, to look him in the eye and make him see what he did. Adrian's voice was low, steady. We'll make him see, but not tonight. Lena turned toward him. You sound certain. I am. Because I've seen what happens when you stop running from ghosts and start chasing them. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapped the glass between them, soft and relentless. Lena reached up and turned the small watch crown gently, as if daring it to tick again, but it didn't move. Still stuck? Adrian asked. She nodded. Maybe it's waiting for the right moment to start again. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. Then let's make sure that moment's worth it. Somewhere behind them, the orchestra swelled into another glittering crescendo. Guests toasted illusions, cameras flashed, deals were whispered. And yet, in the quiet edge of that luminous hall, two people stood shoulder to shoulder, preparing to rewrite their history beneath the rain. The past hadn't ended. It had simply paused, waiting for its clock to start again. The gala upstairs shimmered like a mirage. Music, laughter, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, while 40 floors below, the real story was about to begin. Beneath the art and the applause, Adrian Cole was already setting his plan in motion. He stood near the museum's control booth, casually chatting with a technician. To anyone watching, it looked like a CEO bored by small talk. In truth, every gesture was calculated. Funny thing about these old museum servers, Adrian said with a disarming smile, they overheat when too many security feeds run at once. The technician nodded distractedly, glancing at the monitor wall. Yeah, especially during weather like this, humidity plays hell with the circuits. Adrian leaned closer. Mind if I take a look? I used to manage data systems back when Monarch was a startup. The man stepped aside, grateful for the help of a billionaire who seemed oddly hands-on. Within seconds, Adrian's fingers moved across the keyboard, entering a sequence Martha had designed, an invisible override hidden behind the guise of system maintenance. The cameras blinked once, twice, then half the feeds flickered and froze. That's strange, the technician muttered. Power surge, Adrian said smoothly. Happens during storms. I'll reroute. But the reroute wasn't to the museum's backup grid. It was to him. And upstairs, no one noticed that for the next 7 minutes, every security camera in the East Wing redirected its live footage into a harmless loop. 40 floors down, Lena Alvarez waited in silence. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she stepped out of the service elevator, the faint echo swallowed by the hum of the machines. The basement-level archive was colder than she expected. Metal walls, low light, and the faint mechanical rhythm of cooling vents. She pulled her hood tighter, scanning the corridor. Empty. Are you in? Adrian's voice came through the small earpiece. Just reached the vault hallway, she whispered. No guards yet. Good. You'll find the access panel 2 doors down on your left. The passcode's live for 10 minutes. After that, everything locks. Copy that. She reached the heavy door marked Archival Storage, authorized personnel only. The keypad glowed faintly in the dark. Lena entered the sequence Adrian had provided, 49723. The green light blinked. The door clicked open. Inside was a world of cold metal and silence. Rows of shelves, each stacked with hard drives, sealed boxes, and digital safes labeled by year. A soft hum filled the room, the sound of history being kept alive in static form. She walked down the narrow aisle until she reached the far wall, where an older model of a Lang Financial data vault stood. This was it, the company's legacy archive. If her instincts were right, this vault contained the missing data from the years Lang Financial had manipulated the market, transactions that destroyed reputations and made empires. Lena placed her gloved hand on the scanner. The screen flashed red. Adrian, access denied. Try again. I may need to trigger the biometric bypass manually. She tried again. Nothing. Above her, faint through the comms, came the sound of applause from the gala. Adrian's voice stayed calm. Hold position. The system's recognizing the mainframe reboot. Lena glanced at her reflection in the metal surface. Her heart hammered. She looked composed, but inside she was seconds from panic. Finally, the light shifted from red to green. The vault unlocked with a hiss of air, revealing a series of compartments. She slid open the drawer labeled 2018-20, International Holdings. Inside, A stack of encrypted storage drives, neatly labeled with investor codes and offshore transfers. Lena's breath caught. It was all here. Every falsified report, every manipulated trade, the ghosts of the crime that had destroyed her. "Lena," Adrian's voice came again. "You've got 3 minutes before the loop resets. Get the drives and move." She selected the key unit, a slim black drive with a red tag, code 47BL. She slipped it into her pocket and reached for the next one when a low creak echoed through the hallway. Footsteps. She froze. "Adrian, someone's down here." He swore under his breath. "Security's doing rounds earlier than expected. I'll create a distraction. Just keep quiet." The footsteps grew louder. A flashlight beam cut through the doorway, scanning the aisles. "Maintenance," a voice called. A man's silhouette moved closer. Lena ducked behind a row of shelving, crouching low, clutching the storage drive against her chest. The guard's radio crackled. "Yeah, basement sector clear. Wait, hold on. I thought this was supposed to be locked." The beam swept dangerously close to her face. She held her breath, heart pounding so loud she could hear it over the rain drumming above. Then, the alarm went off. A shrill, echoing wail filled the building, flashing red lights pulsing through the corridor. "What the hell?" the guard shouted, running toward the exit. "Control! We've got a system breach on level 3. Lena didn't move until his footsteps vanished. The red light flickered across the polished floor, illuminating her pale reflection. She exhaled hard, her hands shaking. "Adrian, what did you just do?" "Trigger the smoke detectors near the catering hall. They'll think it's an electrical fault." "You almost gave me a heart attack." "I saved you one," he countered. "Now move. The cameras reset in 90 seconds. She closed the vault carefully, leaving no sign of intrusion. Then she sprinted down the corridor toward the service elevator. Her breath fogged in the cold air. The pendant watch at her neck clinked softly against her chest with each step, its unmoving hands catching the red alarm light like sparks. As she reached the elevator, Adrian's voice returned, quieter this time. "Status? I have the drive." "Good. Meet me in the west stairwell on 39. The elevator will be compromised once the system reboots." She pressed the button, the old machinery groaning in response. 39, she whispered. "Got it." The elevator doors opened with a metallic sigh. She stepped inside, pressing the button just as the emergency lights flickered again. The doors closed. The ride up felt endless. Every second stretched, every sound amplified. The creak of the cables, the hum of the motor, the fading echo of alarms below. Finally, the door slid open. Adrian was there, waiting in the half-lit stairwell, coat damp from the rain he'd walked through on his way back from the control booth. "You look like you just wrestled the devil," he said. "I might have," she replied, holding up the small black drive. "But I took his crown." He smiled, relief, softening his usual composure. "Then let's get you out of here before he notices it's missing." They slipped into the service corridor, blending with staff rushing to address the alarm. No one paid attention to the man in a tuxedo and the woman in an evening gown walking calmly toward the parking level. As they stepped outside, the cold rain greeted them like applause from the city itself. Lena looked up at the dark sky, raindrops streaking her face. "Was that close enough for you?" Adrian laughed quietly. "I said I liked risk, not heart failure." She handed him the drive. "Here, the evidence we needed." He looked down at it, then back at her. "No, Lena, the evidence you earned." For a long moment, they stood under the rain, the world around them muffled by thunder and adrenaline. The red alarm lights from the building flickered faintly against the wet pavement, mirroring the pulse of victory in both their chests. Lena looked at the pendant hanging from her neck. Its hands still hadn't moved, but for the first time in 3 years, she felt like the clock had started again, quietly, invisibly, inside her. The storm that had haunted Seattle for weeks finally began to fade, leaving the city wrapped in a damp hush. Inside Monarch's private analytics suite, the night air hummed with a different kind of electricity, one born not from thunder, but revelation. On the giant screen, streams of decrypted files flickered like staves of music, each line a note in the song of a crime finally exposed. Lena Alvarez sat motionless before the monitors, her reflection fractured across the glowing glass. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clicked through folder after folder, uncovering what years of silence had hidden. They had found it, the truth. Every signature, every payment, every falsified record. And worse, every word. Martha Lee leaned closer to the screen, adjusting her glasses. "There it is," she said, voice taut. "Lang Sr.'s authorization codes. Charles personally approved the forged compliance audits." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And Robert executed the trades. They weren't just complicit, they orchestrated it." Lines of emails cascaded down the screen. Private messages between father and son, discussing how to fabricate losses, how to erase whistleblowers, how to purchase silence. Then came a recorded phone call. Its timestamp matching the day Lena, then Isabella Grant, had been framed. Martha pressed play. Robert Lang's voice crackled through the speakers, cold and effortless. "No one will question the evidence once the transfer's clear. She's perfect for this. Clean record, ambitious, smart enough to do the work, naive enough to trust the wrong people." Lena froze. The room around her seemed to dissolve into that single sound, the voice that had ruined her life, echoing like a ghost from a past she could never bury. Adrian reached out, lowering the volume slightly. "We can stop if you want." She shook her head slowly. "No, keep it going." Another voice followed, Charles Lang this time, calm and deliberate. "When the investigation starts, distance yourself. Let her fall alone. She'll disappear. They always do." Silence. The kind that presses against your ribs and steals your breath. Lena's eyes glistened, the faint blue light from the monitors painting her tears in cold color. Her voice came out quiet, steady only by willpower. "I wasn't paranoid. They really did it. Every word I said was true." Adrian rested a hand on her shoulder. "And now the world will know." Martha turned from the screens, emotion flickering in her tired eyes. "The files are enough to open a federal case, but we'll need an affidavit from someone inside Lang Financial to authenticate chain of custody." A voice answered from the doorway. "You already have one." They all turned. Diana Cross stood there, still in her gray suit from the office, rain dripping from her coat. Her expression was different now, no longer suspicion, but conviction. "Before you say anything," she said, "I know I've been difficult. I thought you were playing him, Lena. I thought this was another scam. But I saw the internal reports today. The numbers match what's on your drives. It's real." Lena blinked, too stunned to respond. "I'll file the report myself," Diana continued, "with the SEC and the Justice Department. I still have contacts who'll listen." Martha studied her for a long moment. "You realize what that means? You'll be going against one of the most powerful families in finance." "I know," Diana said simply, "but I'd rather go down fighting for the truth than live protecting lies." Adrian exhaled, something like relief softening his face. "Then let's finish what they started 3 years ago. Properly this time." For hours they worked in sync, Adrian drafting the summary of findings, Martha certifying timestamps and digital integrity, Diana cross-checking each reference against SEC protocols. Lena remained at the heart of it all, reviewing, organizing, compiling the timeline that had once been used to destroy her. Now it would save her. The rain outside picked up again, tapping softly against the windows. It was no longer a storm, it was rhythm, almost musical. At one point, Adrian looked over at Lena. "You haven't stopped in 6 hours." She smiled faintly without lifting her eyes. "Truth doesn't wait for office hours." Martha chuckled from across the table. "Remind me to never be on your bad side." By midnight, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the servers. Lena opened one final file, the full audio transcript of the conversation that had condemned her. It began with Robert's voice again, younger but already venomous. "She's just a placeholder," he said casually. "A convenient substitute until we shift the blame. Once she's out, the trail ends." The words hit harder than any accusation. Lena closed her eyes, hearing the echo not as data, but as memory. Every sleepless night, every door that had closed, every whispered rumor that followed her like a shadow. When she opened them again, her tears had fallen freely, tracing pale paths down her cheeks. Adrian's hand came to rest on her shoulder again, steady and warm. "They can't silence you anymore," he said softly. "Now they'll have to hear every word you ever spoke." Lena turned toward him. "Do you think they'll care? People like them always find a way to twist the truth." Adrian met her gaze. "Maybe, but this time we have proof, and proof sings louder than lies." Martha cleared her throat gently. "You two can have your dramatic moment later. We still need to submit this evidence securely before sunrise." Diana smirked faintly. "I'll encrypt the packet and deliver it myself. Federal channels will recognize my credentials. She gathered the hard drives carefully, as though holding something sacred. Once this is in their hands, it's out of Lang's control. Lena nodded. Thank you, Diana. The other woman hesitated, then gave a small smile. Don't thank me yet. When this goes public, it's going to shake the market to its core. I hope you're ready for what follows. Lena looked at the frozen watch pendant in her hand. For the first time, she said softly, I am. The monitors dimmed one by one as the system began encrypting the submission files. Adrian shut his laptop and leaned back, exhaustion and satisfaction woven together on his fur. Martha stretched her arms. It's funny, isn't it? The same data they used to destroy her will now destroy them. Poetic justice, Adrian murmured. Mathematical justice, Lena corrected. Numbers always tell the truth. You just have to... Listen, he smiled at her. And tonight, they finally sang your song. The room filled with a rare quiet, the kind that follows truth revealed, the pause between the storm and the sunrise. On the screen, the final confirmation appeared. Upload complete, verified chain of evidence. Lena stared at it as if afraid it might vanish. Then she whispered, It's over. Adrian shook his head gently. No, Lena. It's beginning. Outside, dawn broke faintly over the city, the first pale gold cutting through the clouds. Inside, the glow from the monitors cast soft blue across Lena's face. Her eyes reflected the light of the data, the truth she had fought for, cried for, nearly died for. Tears shimmered again, but this time they carried no pain, only peace. The watch pendant hung still against her collarbone, its silent hands gleaming under the glow. For the first time, it didn't matter whether it ever moved again. Time, finally, was hers. The rain had finally left Seattle. In its place, the morning arrived with a clarity so sharp it felt like forgiveness. Across the skyline, the glass towers gleamed under a wash of gold. The storm was over, both in the sky and in the world of numbers and deceit that had once ruled their lives. The news broke at dawn. Lang financial executives arrested in federal fraud case. The headline rolled across every major network, mirrored in coffee shop windows and glowing billboards downtown. For once, the truth wasn't whispered in corridors or buried in documents. It was public, loud, irrefutable. Inside the Lang financial headquarters, chaos unfolded like a slow, cinematic undoing. Agents from the SEC and federal prosecutors walked past marble columns and glass doors, their footsteps echoing through the same halls where arrogance had once been currency. Cameras flashed as Robert Lang was escorted from his corner office, the polished smile gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Behind him, Charles Lang was led away quietly, his cufflinks glinting like tiny remnants of an empire collapsing. The official statement was precise, factual, and devastating. Evidence supplied by Monarch Capital and verified by independent auditors has confirmed a decade-long scheme of market manipulation, document forgery, and obstruction of justice. For every line of that statement, Lena Alvarez felt her lungs expand a little more, like she was breathing for the first time in years. At Monarch's headquarters, the mood was quieter. There were no celebrations, no champagne, just a stillness that came after the storm, the kind that only truth can leave behind. Lena stood by the wide glass windows of Adrian's office, watching the city stretch into sunlight. Below, reporters crowded the steps, their microphones flashing like sparks of curiosity. Adrian entered, his expression calm, but his eyes still carrying the weight of sleepless nights. It's done, he said softly. The case is officially registered. The files are public, and your name, Isabella Grant, is cleared. She turned toward him, disbelief flickering like a shadow. They actually said it? Out loud? He smiled faintly. On live television, you're officially exonerated. Lena exhaled slowly, tears threatening but refusing to fall. I thought this day would never come. Adrian moved closer. Neither did they. But you didn't just prove them wrong. You redefined what strength looks like. The rest unfolded like a symphony of closure. Martha gave her testimony in court, dismantling Lang's false audits line by line. Diana stood beside federal investigators during the press conference, confirming every timestamp and transaction with the precision of someone who had finally chosen the right side. And when the verdict came, temporary detainment without bail, Lena didn't feel triumph. She felt stillness, the quiet relief of balance restored. A week later, Monarch Capital held a press briefing. The world expected Adrian to take the spotlight, to claim the moral victory, but instead, he stepped aside and handed the microphone to Lena. She hesitated, the sea of cameras before her looking more like waves than people. Then she spoke, not as a victim, not as a headline, but as someone who had rebuilt herself from the debris of deceit. "I used to believe that truth was something you could lose," she began, "that once it was stolen from you, you'd never get it back. But truth isn't fragile, it's patient. It waits until you have the courage to face it again." The room fell silent. Every word landed like a note in perfect rhythm. She looked out over the crowd. "My name is Isabella Grant. For 3 years, I was called Lena Alvarez. Both names are real, both women survived, but only one of them learned that silence doesn't protect you, it buries you, and I'm done being buried." The applause was quiet at first, then built like thunder returning from the distance. After the conference, when the reporters had gone and the lights dimmed, Adrian found her standing alone on the terrace. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet pavement and early spring. He held a small box in his hand. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled, opening it to reveal a simple silver wristwatch, elegant, timeless, its second hand ticking softly. "I thought it was time you had one that works," he said. Lena laughed softly, wiping a stray tear. "You're sentimental for a man who once made millions off algorithms." "Algorithms don't lie," he said, fastening the watch gently around her wrist. "But they also don't forgive. You do." She looked down at the watch face, the steady rhythmic motion of its hands, and for a brief, weightless moment, time itself seemed to sync with her heartbeat. They left the building together, walking toward the harbor. The dawn had broken cleanly, the rain-washed streets glowing under a sky of pale gold. The city that had once drowned her now seemed to shine for her. Every reflection in the puddles, every beam of light on the water, whispered the same thing: "You made it back." They reached the pier just as the first ferry horn sounded. The sea stretched endlessly before them, its surface calm, carrying the light like liquid glass. Adrian leaned against the railing, looking out. "What will you do now? Go back to the markets? Start a fund under your real name?" Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe both, maybe neither." He raised an eyebrow. "Philosophical as always." "I've learned something," she said, her eyes on the horizon. "Time never really stops. We do. We pause because of fear or pain or guilt. But time, it just waits for us to catch up." She touched the watch on her wrist, its ticking soft but steady. Maybe it wasn't broken. Maybe it was waiting for the right person to make it move again. Adrian looked at her, the reflection of sunrise glinting in his eye. "And has that person arrived?" She smiled, meeting his gaze. "He's standing right next to me." For a long while, they stood in silence, the city waking behind them, the ocean stretching ahead. The gulls circled above. The tide lapped softly against the pier. Adrian reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The new watch ticked, quietly between them, a rhythm neither of them needed to rush. After 3 years of stolen time, it was finally theirs again. Somewhere, far away, a clock struck 7. In that sound, Lena heard everything she had lost, returning, renewed. And for the first time, she didn't just exist in the present. She belonged to it.